The general took me back to the mansion and placed me in a side courtyard. The servants laughed at me for being a nameless and mute little girl who was pregnant. Little did they know that the general was a fool who had been seriously injured and lost his memory not long ago. He wanted to marry me, and he took on all the dirty and hard work just to collect 9 copper coins so that the village scholar could write a marriage certificate for us. The fool regained his memory and became a general. In order to achieve his great cause, he wanted to marry a noble lady. I, his pregnant wife, became a burden to him. So the marriage certificate was annulled, the child was aborted, and my love for him died. Later, they said that the general fought his way into the imperial city, asking everyone he met if they had seen his mute wife. 1. I haven't seen Akeo for a long time since I found out I was pregnant. Akeo is my husband. 1 month ago, a group of armored warriors broke into my house with weapons. The moment they saw Ah Chow, they all knelt on the ground and shouted, "Welcome back, General." Only then did I realize that Akeo was not just my silly husband. He had another identity, the great General Chen. Now that he has restored his memory, he naturally needs to restore his identity. In the huge general's mansion, I bent my knees and huddled myself into a small ball, holding back my tears. I leaned against the bed and heard the servants outside whispering, "Who is this Miss Song?" The general brought her back, but didn't even give her a proper status. She is so beautiful and pregnant, but the general doesn't care about her. He even arranges her to stay in such a remote courtyard. What future do you have with such a master? I felt a little uncomfortable. I was not the girl that Ah Chow brought back without any name or status. I was his wife, with the sun and the moon as matchmakers and the mountains and rivers as betrothal gifts. We got married under the witness of heaven and earth. But I am a mute, so I can't refute them. Familiar footsteps were heard outside the door, followed by panicked pleas for mercy. Those who talk about the master will each be given 50 lashes of the cane and expelled from the mansion. I hurriedly got out of bed and met Ah Chow, who was walking towards me. He didn't even have time to change out of his court clothes before he pulled me into his arms. Sway, I have something important to tell you.
2.
Seeing that I was not wearing shoes, Akeo carefully carried me back to the bed and wiped my feet with a towel. After washing his hands, he held me in his arms and gently placed one hand on my belly to feel the little life in me. Naturally, I couldn't feel anything, but I was very happy. Since I found out I was pregnant, this was the first time that Ah Chow showed his expectation for having a child. This was also the first time he had shown his affection to me like this since returning to the general's mansion. We seemed to have gone back to the past, and I gestured to him what the important thing was. He paused, then said affectionately, Sway, we want to be together forever. We and our child can be together forever. He is my husband. Wherever he is, my children and I will be there too. We will be together forever. He understood my gestures, and even more so my thoughts. He smiled and buried his face in my neck, taking a deep breath. Sway, if the emperor issues an order for me to get married, I can welcome you into my family then. Although it is unfair for you to be a concubine, you can rest assured that the new bride is sensible and she doesn't mind having a concubine's son before the legitimate son. You can take good care of your pregnancy and wait for our child to be born. For a moment, I was completely stunned. The joy just now disappeared in an instant. My ears were buzzing and my heart felt like it was pricked by a needle. Chen hadn't noticed yet, he was still talking. When our child is born, I will register him under the name of my principal wife. He will have the status of a legitimate son, and no one can bully him. If you become my concubine, I can also protect you well and protect you for the rest of your life. I couldn't believe that the person who claimed to protect me all my life became the one who hurt me the most. I pushed him away violently. When he saw my pale face, he seemed to realize that what he had said was a bit cruel to me. He reached out and tried to touch my face. I subconsciously dodged backwards. Ignoring his stunned expression, I gestured anxiously. We have worshipped heaven and earth before the mountain god. I am your wife. How can you marry someone else? Chen sighed and wanted to hold my hand again. Sway, sway, you know. I lost my memory at that time and there was no matchmaker or engagement, so it doesn't count. How can it not count? I shook his hand off and hurriedly ran to the cabinet to look for the marriage certificate I had put in my bag. Xia Qingzhen carefully protected me from behind. I pointed to the marriage certificate, which read, "The two families marry, sign a contract in one hall, and the marriage is forever, and they are a perfect match with the same name." I write this down on a piece of red paper with my promise to grow old together so that our alliance will be recorded in our love history. Song Sui Sui. This is evidence from the Song dynasty. 3. When I picked up Xie Qingzhen, he was covered in blood and was already breathing heavily. I spent all my money to save him. When he woke up, he didn't remember his family, so I gave him my home to recuperate. He would help me with work, stand up for me, and drive away the thugs who bullied me. He couldn't remember his own name, so he took my surname and gave me the given name Chao. He told me, "Year after year, morning after morning, the ears of corn will never be separated." In order to marry me, he worked hard to make money. He went hunting in the mountains, moved goods at the docks, helped people slaughter pigs, and did everything he could to save up 9 copper coins. He excitedly took me to the village scholar to write the marriage certificate. He has always regarded this marriage certificate as more important than anything else and always puts it under his pillow when he sleeps. Every time I took it to take a look at it, he would stare at me cautiously, afraid that I would dirty or damage the marriage certificate. When packing his luggage, Xie Qingzhen didn't take out the marriage certificate. I thought he forgot in a hurry. I carefully picked up the marriage certificate and put it into my bag. Maybe it's not that I forgot, it's just that I don't care anymore. Xie Qingzhen saw me pointing at the marriage certificate stubbornly and said helplessly, "Sui Sui, I'm Xie Qingzhen, the great general guarding the country. I am not the Song dynasty. Marriage is not a joke." It was a joke. He said that the marriage certificate that Akeo had worked so hard to obtain and regarded as a treasure was a joke. He took the marriage certificate from my hand, put it aside casually, and hugged me and tried to reason with me. "Sui Sui, the imperial decree has been issued, and my marriage is a foregone conclusion. It's not that I don't want you. It's just that this is the only way I can welcome you home openly, and our child will have a proper identity. Although you are my concubine, you know that I love you the most. Our family will be together forever and ever, and no one will ever interfere. Sui Sui, this is already the best arrangement. Do you understand my painstaking efforts?" I struggled hard to break free from his arms, but he let me go for fear of hurting me. I picked up the marriage certificate he had thrown aside and cried. He should be thankful that I am dumb and cannot say anything unpleasant. I can only wipe my tears and gesture. "You are the great General Xie Qingzhen, not my husband Akeo. I don't want to be your concubine. I want to go home." 4. Hearing that I was leaving, Xie Qingzhen's eyes turned red, and after a while he said with a wronged look, "Where can you go when you are carrying my child? The world is not tolerant of women, especially a pregnant woman without a husband. If caught, she will be charged with adultery and thrown into a pig cage. You said that wherever I am is your home. The general's mansion is your home." Xie Qingzhen cast his eyes on my belly and gently comforted me.
"Sui Sui, calm down.
Think about the child. You said you would do anything for the child. For the sake of the children, can you please be patient?" I felt waves of sharp pain in my abdomen, which was getting more and more painful. I held my stomach tightly with both hands. Xie Qingzhen naturally noticed my clues and hurriedly carried me to the bed, keeping his eyes fixed on me, and shouted outside without turning his head, "Call the doctor." In the pain of labor, I seemed to remember what I said to Xie Qingzhen when I found out I was pregnant. I am willing to do anything for the child.
5.
When he found out I was pregnant, Xie Qingzhen didn't look happy. He just stared at my belly with a frown on his face. Madame Xie asked her personal nanny to bring a bowl of abortion pills and said seriously, "General, Madame asked you not to forget your last name and first name. You know, this kid came at the wrong time." What did I do at that time? I knocked over the bowl, hugged Xie Qingzhen, and cried, gesturing. "This is our child. Ah Chao. We can't give him up." I'd do anything for my children. Chen looked at me deeply, took the nanny away, and there was no news from him for several days. No one came to deliver contraceptive soup anymore. So when Chen appeared again today, I really thought he brought good news. Unexpectedly, this news was not good for me. At that time, Japanese pirates were invading along the coast. At that time, a Chow hit his head against the Japanese pirates in the fight to protect me. He killed all the Japanese pirates who bullied us, and the general's memory was restored. Japanese pirates are rampant, and it would be risky for me to go home alone, but how can I protect the baby in my belly? I was in Shangjing. After leaving the general's mansion, I had no household registration in Shangjing, and I didn't even have a place to settle down. The doctor had finished taking my pulse at Xieching and Zerjing, and he carefully told me, "Madam, you are in bad shape now, so don't let your emotions fluctuate too much. This pregnancy is not stable yet, so you need to stay in bed and rest. For the sake of my children, I can't even move." 6. The person Chen was going to marry was Princess Ningping, the daughter of Prince Nanan and the emperor's cousin. Princess Ningping has always admired Chen, and Prince Nanan also admires Chen. I had originally planned to wait until Chen returned from his southern tour before asking for an imperial decree to grant the marriage. Even though there is one more me and one more child now, Princess Ningping still wants to marry Chen. Chen came in with an invitation to Princess Ningping's 100 Flowers party and carefully observed my expression. He often comes over like this recently. If I don't talk to him, he won't say anything but just keeps his eyes on me. Seeing that I was as silent as ever, he spoke up. Sui, Princess Ningping wants to see you. Don't worry, she's a sensible person. I told her about what happened between us, and she didn't mind. She's hosting a banquet this time, and many high-class ladies will be attending. You can use this opportunity to relax. She promised me that she would take care of you. Even if we haven't gotten married yet, if the wife wants to see the concubine, I have no right to refuse. I also selfishly want to see what kind of woman Chen is going to marry. 7. On the day of the banquet, a group of people surrounded me and dressed up. Chen personally took me to the palace. Princess Ningping sat in the main seat, gesturing with her newly painted nails and looking at me nonchalantly. She is still somewhat pretty, but how long can she use her beauty to seduce others? Princess Ningping clapped her hands, and opera music began to sound from the stage. The opera sings the story of Sui Lan. Sui Lan was a noble lady from a marquise family. She and the Prince of Ningchong were a match made in heaven. However, when the Prince of Ningchong was on his southern tour, he was bewitched by a skinny girl with a humble status and a charming figure. He brought her back and forced her to be his concubine. Sui Lan and the concubine entered the house together. She endured humiliation and showed the demeanor of a mistress. In contrast, Skinny Ma was petty and his beauty and love faded. The child born by Shou Ma recognized Sui Lan as his mother and belittled Shou Ma. Sui Lan seized the opportunity to find fault and sold Shou Ma, and the prince did not say anything. Finally, the prince and Sui Lan gave birth to another lovely child. The skinny horse's child was jealous and did bad things, but he suffered the consequences and was exiled to the manor for the rest of his life. The play was over. The ladies clapped and praised, and I sat stiffly by the side. Everyone's eyes turned to me intentionally or unintentionally. As for this person, it is important to know oneself. If you have an affair without a matchmaker, the child you conceive will only be a bad one. We, the legal wives, despise those seductive women who use their sex appeal to seduce others. But don't worry about it. How long can a man's love last? These concubines are servants after all. We can just find some fault with them and sell them off. Miss Song, is that right? Princess Ningping said as if she was talking about a play, but she was pointing directly at me. Miss Song, as the saying goes, play tells the story of life. I invited you to watch the play, so naturally I want to hear your opinion. I clenched my fingers and gestured word by word. If given a choice, who would want to be a concubine? Princess Ningping didn't understand sign language, so she naturally couldn't understand what I was saying, but she didn't need to understand. She smiled and said to the person next to her, "I forgot that Miss Song is a mute. But it doesn't matter. Opera is just opera. In the future, Miss Song and I will share a husband, and your child will be my legitimate son." She turned her eyes to my belly. As the mistress of the house, I must take good care of Miss Song and my children. I stroked my belly, and my hands trembled slightly.
8.
In the evening, Xie Qingzhen hugged me and gently asked me how I was getting along with Princess Ningping. I didn't want to talk, so I turned my back to him, and a tear fell down. Xie Qingzhen handed the power of life and death over me and our child to another woman. How could we get along well? Xie Qingzhen let me be his concubine, and in the future he and Ningping will live together day and night and raise my child together. Once they developed feelings for each other, Xie Qingzhen's feelings for me naturally faded. The child will disown me, and the mistress will sell me out. This is the worst possible outcome. Why can't I give it a try with my child? I think it's time to leave. Even if the road ahead is difficult, my life and my child's life are in our own hands. Don't rely on or depend on anyone.
9.
I've been looking forward to the opportunity. In a blink of an eye, it was the day for Xie Qingzhen to propose marriage. Xie Qingzhen took his subordinates to hunt wild geese as a betrothal gift. The goose holds the husband, or it is said that he will not mate again. At the beginning, Akeo made his own bow and arrow to hunt geese, and set traps and waited day after day. I saw how hard he was working and told him that I didn't care about these etiquettes. At that time, the fool Ah Chao smiled innocently. "Sway, sway, as long as I can do it. What others have, I think you should have too." Unexpectedly, after only a few months, he would be hunting geese for others. The people in the mansion were busy preparing for the wedding banquet. No one thought I would run. I disguised myself as a maid and easily left the house. But I had no identity, so I could only disguise myself as a beggar fleeing famine, wait until it got dark and the market closed, and then take advantage of the crowd to sneak out of the city gate. I exchanged clothes with a beggar on the street, ruffled my hair, smeared black ash on my face, and squatted at the city gate with a tattered bag and a broken bowl. When Xie Qingzhen and his companions returned from hunting geese, I quickly buried my head in my knees. "General, why don't you shoot your arrows? If you don't hunt the geese, how will you explain to us?" His subordinates asked curiously. The sound of horse hooves was heard everywhere, and Xie Qingzhen said coldly, "Xie, go to Huiling Pavilion and buy a pair of sculptured wild geese. There's no limit on the amount of money." The rotten smell of cloves made me want to vomit, and the baby in my belly jumped as if it heard its father's voice. I touched my belly and said to myself, be patient, and mother will take you home, back to our own home." Finally, when the market closed at night, I mixed in with the common people leaving the city. This was the time when the guards were most relaxed. There were too many people, and the guards would not check the household registration of each one, especially those dressed as beggars, whom they would not even look at twice. It's almost my turn. A long arrow shot towards the city gate. The sound of galloping horses can be heard before the people arrive. Close the city gates. Pass the general's order. An important criminal has gone missing from the court. The entire city is under martial law. Everyone stay where you are and don't move. Take out your household registration and wait for inspection.
10.
A group of soldiers cleared the way, and Xie Qingzhen rode his horse at full speed. Everyone was frightened by the tense atmosphere and ran around in panic. I carefully protected my stomach and hid in the crowd. It was the first time that Xie Qingzhen lost his composure outside. He jumped off his horse with bloodshot eyes and locked his eyes on me in the crowd. The soldiers quickly calmed the fleeing crowd. Xie Qingzhen walked over quickly, grabbed my hand fiercely, and said, "Where have you been? I almost couldn't find you." The worry in Xie Qingzhen's eyes was real. I looked at him, and tears fell. "There is no Akeo in Shangjing, Xie Qingzhen. Please let me go home." He stopped my gestures and, ignoring my filthiness, held me tightly in his arms. "Sway, sway." My tone was a little harsh, but I wasn't blaming you. You must have come out to look for me and got lost. Don't be afraid. I'll take you home. He ignored my struggles and carried me into the carriage. He simply gave up riding the horse and wanted to get in the carriage and go with me. I couldn't get away from him. I couldn't say anything to curse him, and as soon as I made a gesture, he came and held my hand. I was so angry that I pulled my hand away and slapped him. The entire carriage was silent, and Jen didn't speak for a long while. I didn't expect him to be hit so hard. It was a bit scary when he had a blank expression on his face, and the baby jumped in my stomach. I put my hands on my stomach, trying to remain calm. Seems to have sensed my emotions. He leaned over and gently placed his head against the baby in my belly, his tone somewhat sad. "It's okay, baby. Daddy doesn't feel any pain at all. After your mother vented her anger, she took you and your father home." For some reason, my tears flowed even harder. 11. The carriage stopped at the main courtyard of the general's mansion, and Jen carried me out of the carriage. After walking a few steps, he saw Madame Xie's personal nanny holding a whip and a group of servants, blocking the road with solemn expressions. The maid stepped forward with the bramble in her hand. "Master, Madame asked me to ask you if you know what you did wrong. You sealed off the city without the emperor's order, abused your power for personal gain, mobilized the army, rode a horse in the street, and lost your dignity for a woman." Xiechengen's eyes were filled with indifference. He called 2 maids to take me back to the courtyard. Sway, go back to your room and wait for me." Looking at the situation, it will be hard for Jen to get away with it. I looked at the bramble in the nanny's hand, which was a foot thick. Noticing my gaze, Mammy remained calm and said, "Ms. Song, Madam said this is my Xie family's business. Even though you saved my young master's life, you haven't even entered yet. The implication is that I am not a member of the Xie family and have no right to be involved in Xie family affairs." I knew very early on that the Xie family was no longer my home. If Jen hadn't forced me to come back, I would have stayed away from the Xie family long ago. My expression didn't change as I turned and walked away. Xiechengen's anxious voice came from behind. Sway, walk slower, go back to your room and wait for me." The maids quickly followed, and under their guidance, I returned to the familiar courtyard. The yard was no longer as deserted as before, and there were more people serving. Wherever I go, there are people surrounding me. I was so annoyed that I could only lie down on the bed after taking a bath. The person who was serving me finally breathed a sigh of relief, and I also breathed a sigh of relief.
12.
In a daze, I seemed to hear a gasp. Someone seemed to be shouting outside the door. "General, let me apply the medicine to you." After a while, the sound disappeared. The bed sank slightly, and there was a familiar smell. A pair of big hands slowly wrapped around my waist, like a sigh. Sway, do you know that the emperor is cruel, licentious, and immoral, and forced his most important ministers to death? In order to seize the military power of my Xie family, 100,000 soldiers were killed in Yenmen. Right now, there is wailing everywhere, and war everywhere. Our home in southern Fujian was also attacked by Japanese pirates. "I'm worried about you going back alone with the children." His voice was deep. "King Nanan promised to help me. In order to accomplish my great cause, Princess Ningping will not dare to embarrass you after you enter the palace. If you don't like her, can we just stay in the courtyard and live our own lives?" In the dark night, naturally no one answered him. It seemed very difficult for him to turn over. I heard a few muffled groans. When he finally turned around, I felt something soft pressing against my lips. He just kissed me, without intending to wake me up. "Sweet dreams, my dear Su." After he lay down and his breathing became steady, I opened my eyes, and the tears accumulated in my eye sockets instantly wet the pillow. He has his own great cause, but there is a place for me in his heart. But this position is too small, so I can only be a concubine. Even if he knew, I don't want to be a concubine. 13. Xiechengen was whipped with 100 canes in the ancestral hall. He had no time to recuperate before he had to accept various investigations from the imperial city administration. After all, ordering the city gates to be closed privately is not a trivial matter. He goes out early and comes back late every day, and even if he only has an hour of rest, he will come to see me. I don't know how Xiechingen operated, but the emperor treated this matter as a romantic affair and took a big cut of it. It's just that the emperor specifically wanted to see me to see what kind of woman had made Xiechingen so confused. Not only me, the emperor also ordered the invitation of Princess Ningping and held a grand banquet in the palace. There was singing and dancing, wine and meat at the banquet, which made me feel heavy-hearted. Xiechingen saw that I was feeling uncomfortable, so he asked someone to take me out for some fresh air. The palace maid who led me brought me to the lake, but I didn't expect to bump into Princess Ningping, who was throwing stones at the lake. I turned around and tried to leave, but the two maids Xiechingen had assigned to me stepped forward to stop me, saying apologetically, "Miss Song, from now on, the princess will be the general's wife. Our family, it looks like I can't leave." Princess Ningping threw away the stone in her hand and clapped her hands.
Song sui sui, let's talk.
She sneered. "I still underestimated you.
Xiechingen actually did this for you.
At this critical moment, he was so arrogant for you that he privately closed the city gates and mobilized soldiers and horses in the street." At this point, she said harshly, "Looks like I can't keep you here." I kept observing the maid's position and would run when I saw an opening. I didn't expect that the two maids knew martial arts. They caught me in a few steps and took me to the lake. Ningping had torn his clothes into a mess by this time, and with the help of the maid, he handcuffed my hands behind my back and held my shoulders. With a look, the maid retreated far away. The water of Ening Lake is drawn from the spring of heaven, and it is freezing cold. Guess if you go to the lake and feel it, you will soon say goodbye to me forever. Don't worry, just go splash around in the lake first. Even if you can swim, I won't let you get out of the water until the cold water has drowned you. I really don't know how long you can hold on in such a cold day." She pushed me towards the water with great interest. "When you are dead, I will tell Xiechingen that you saw me alone by the lake and dismissed the maid he gave me, intending to murder me. You deserve to be pushed into the lake during an argument." Her hands began to exert force. "Xiechingen wants to achieve great things. If you die, does he have no choice but to trust me?" To be honest, Princess Ningping, a spoiled noble lady, actually doesn't have much strength. Even though the maid managed to control me with her help, when she exerted her force, I used it to push back and turn quickly, and she lost her balance and fell into the lake. She obviously couldn't swim. She flapped her wings in the water and was about to sink. Seeing a life disappear in front of my eyes, I can swim, but I can't jump into the lake to save her. The lake water is cold, and I have to protect the baby in my belly first. But whether out of conscience or practical considerations, I had to save her. There happened to be a long stick by the lake. I guessed that it was the stick that Ningping was going to use to drive me off the shore after I fell into the water. I picked up the stick and stretched myself toward her to pass it. 14. How dare you? Help him. Hurry up and save him. Call the imperial physician, the imperial physician. My daughter, I will make the person who pushed you into the water pay with his life. There was a noisy sound of footsteps, followed by two maids jumping into the water and easily rescuing Ningping. Xiechingen walked up to me, took the stick from my hand, and checked me up and down to see if I was okay. The emperor smiled drunkenly, waiting for a good show. King Nanan had a dark face and asked his maid to take care of Ningping. He looked at me as if he wanted to skin me alive. I used gestures to tell Xiechingen what had happened. He read it carefully, understood it, and comforted me in a gentle voice. In this tense atmosphere, I did calm down with his comfort. Ningping was sent away for treatment, and the emperor asked what happened. The two maids who were bribed by Ningping knelt down and cried first. Ms. Song said she wanted to take a walk by the lake, and she happened to run into Princess Ningping, who was enjoying the cool air by the lake. Ms. Song waved us away and said she wanted to chat with Princess Ningping. Although we feel something is wrong, she is our master, and we dare not disobey her. Xiechingen asked with a cold face, "How did the princess fall into the lake? Did you see it?" A maid trembled. Although I didn't see it, I heard the cry for help from this side. It was because of this cry for help that we were able to rush over and save the princess. I think this cry for help can only be from the princess. Everyone present knew that I was a mute and naturally could not make a sound. Without waiting for Xie Qingzhen to speak, Prince Nanan cried out to the emperor, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, my daughter is in such a pity. You must take care of her. This woman is so vicious. Does she think that by killing my daughter, she can become Xie Qingzhen's legal wife? The emperor seemed to be thinking, Thank you, my dear. What do you think? Ningping is my cousin after all. Even if she is your woman, you can't set your sights on the royal family. Xie Qingzhen bowed and clasped his fists. I cannot convict you based on the maid's one-sided statement alone. Your Majesty, please give me some time to investigate this matter. Come here, take the two maids away, and torture them severely. Xie Qingzhen signaled Xie Yi to step forward and capture the man, his voice cold. He failed to protect his master and made assumptions about his master. What truth can such a person tell? 15. King Nanan angrily rebuked. The facts are right before our eyes. How could the royal children frame you? Xie Qingzhen, you keep making excuses. Are you trying to protect this woman? Your behavior makes me doubt your loyalty to the royal family. As a man, if you can't figure out such a thing, I don't think there's any need for this marriage. The emperor stroked his beard. Thank you, my dear minister, for the honor of my royal daughter. Xie Qingzhen closed his eyes tightly, then opened them again with a sharp gaze. According to your highness's wishes, what do you want me to do? King Nanan sneered. My request is not excessive. He wants my daughter's life, so let her exchange her life for his. Nanan Wang continued to increase his stakes. My dear nephew, if you cling to these little love affairs, you won't go far in life. Xie Qingzhen turned to look at me with a wry smile, tears streaming down his eyes. He walked towards me slowly, his voice sad. A life for a life, a life for a life. Susu, did you hear that? He came to hold me. I'm with you, it won't hurt. My eyes were red, and I kept shaking my head at Xie Qingzhen. I didn't push her. She wanted to hurt me and fell down by herself. Xie Qingzhen, you believe me. I gestured vigorously. Xie Qingzhen covered my eyes with one hand and took me to the riverside in a few steps. Sway, sway. Bear with it for a moment. Don't be afraid, I'm with you. With his splash, he brought me into the water. Just as Ningping said, the lake water was really cold, so cold that it was bone-chilling. Just as Ningping said, Xie Qingzhen wants to do great things. Before I die, Xie Qingzhen doesn't believe me. I felt a sudden pain in my stomach and tried to swim to the shore countless times, but Xie Qingzhen held me in his arms. In the cold lake water, I gradually became numb from the pain and felt something falling rapidly from my stomach. I wanted to see the blood spreading from under the skirt and dyeing the bottom of the lake red. My eyes were filled with red.
16.
Xie Qingzhen has been awake for 3 days and 3 nights, without eating or drinking. He invited the senior monks in the temple to pray for the child's soul to be reborn. He stayed awake for 3 days, without eating or drinking, and set up a mourning hall for the child and lit a lamp for him. This way, he said, the child would be able to forgive him and find his way home. He will come back to us again. I didn't go to the child's funeral. As his mother, I failed to protect him and watched his father kill him. What qualifications do I have to see my child again? I am not worthy of being a mother in my life. The 4th day, after the child left, Xie Qingzhen knelt before me like a madman, holding a lotus lantern.
Sui sui, look.
The lotus lantern has been lit for 4 days. The monk said that the child has forgiven me and he will come back. I will come back to us again. I knocked the lotus lantern out of his hand and said in a hoarse voice, Get away, you, get away. None of us has the right to ask our children to forgive us. Xie Qingzhen knelt down to pick up the lotus lantern and protect the flame, then his face was shocked. Sway, sway, your throat. You are speaking, you are speaking. 17. The doctors said slowly. Madam's vocal cords are intact. The reason she didn't speak before was more of a psychological problem, not that she couldn't speak. I never told anyone that when I was a child, my parents took me out for a trip and encountered bandits. My parents hid me in the bushes and told me not to make a sound no matter what I saw. I watched my parents being brutally killed by bandits in the bushes without saying a word. He was picked up and taken to the government office without saying a word. Later, when I lived alone, I didn't know how to start. Now I hate myself for not being able to speak up. Why couldn't she just say no and firmly refuse to be Xie Qing'an's concubine? Why can't I explain that I didn't push Ning Ping? Why can't I speak up and save my child? I often knelt in front of Madame Xie's door. The nanny beside Madame Xie looked at my haggard appearance and sighed, "What a bad fate." I used my hoarse voice to persuade Madame Xie to come out of the ancestral hall. She gave me a Beijing residence permit and a promise. Without my consent, Xie Qingzhen will never force me.
18.
Southern Fujian has been completely occupied, and I can only set up a food stall in Beijing to sell tofu pudding. Xie Qingzhen would always secretly hide in the corner of the street and watch me, but I would ignore him. There was a rumor in the alley that a tofu beauty had arrived, and more customers came to my stall to eat tofu pudding. The diners are a mixed bunch, and there are always people trying to take advantage. Xie Qingzhen was so furious that he drew his knife and stood at my stall, scaring all my diners away. He ordered 6 bowls of salty tofu pudding. I didn't say anything, but made it for him and paid for it. The tofu pudding that couldn't be sold would be thrown away and wasted, so I just stuffed bowl after bowl of it into my stomach. Xie Qingzhen was so scared that he quickly stopped me and said with red eyes, "I was wrong, Sui, I was wrong. I'm leaving now. You continue with your business. I won't dare to come here again." 19. As winter turned to spring, my business became more and more stable. But I also feel the changes in the current situation. More and more officers and soldiers were patrolling the capital, and martial law was imposed in the imperial city. Large numbers of battle reports came in, and under the command of Xie Qingzhen, victorious reports continued to be received from the coastal areas in suppressing the rebellion. The situation at court became increasingly serious. The emperor wanted to release Xie Qing'an's military power, and the ministers finally saw some hope for peace. Naturally, he was unwilling to accompany the emperor to reenact the drama of the defeat of Xie's 100,000-strong army 20 years ago, pushing the country back into war. Prince Nanan even rebelled under the pretext of clearing the emperor's court and tried to overthrow the emperor. Xie Qingzhen, who was supposed to be his son-in-law and on the same side as him, failed to marry him as he wished. Both the emperor and Prince Nangan wanted to win him over, but he took leave on the grounds that an old injury he had sustained in a war abroad had recurred. People who claimed to be recovering from injuries would mingle with the diners every day just to sit at my stall and eat 2 bowls of tofu pudding. He also realized that only when we are strangers can we live in the same space peacefully. He didn't dare to talk to me about other things. He only asked for 2 bowls of tofu pudding each time, without asking whether it was salty or sweet, hoping that I would ask more questions. Or he would deliberately give me more money every time and ask me to stop him and give him the change. This is all that can happen between us.
20.
The situation in the court became increasingly serious. When Prince Nanan led his troops, he was unable to take his family with him. As luck would have it, it was Xie Qingzhen who led the troops to intercept the family of King Nanan. Xie Qingzhen invited Princess Ningping and Princess Nanan back in a panic, and they were imprisoned in the cold palace by the emperor. Prince Nanan led his troops to attack the imperial city. When approaching the imperial city, Xie Qingzhen finally recovered from his illness. He led the Xie family army to attack the rebels all the way. The emperor finally realized that he could no longer keep his throne. Whether it was Xie Qingzhen or Prince Nanan, the first thing they did when entering the imperial city was to take his head. The emperor burned down the palace and poured plague-causing poison from the western regions into the moat. He ran away with the queen and his beloved concubine, but disregarded human lives and wanted to leave a dead city for Xie Qingzhen. People on the street gradually found that they had rashes on their bodies and were coughing constantly. Many people died after coughing and unable to catch their breath. More and more people came to the clinic, and the court was in chaos. The few imperial doctors gathered together to study the disease and determined that it was an epidemic that was not only contagious between people, but could also be fatal. The whole of Shangjing was shrouded in the sound of coughing. Ministers and wealthy families had already packed their bags and prepared to flee. Only the common people were unable to leave. Soldiers sealed off the city, and there was no way to seek medical treatment. It seemed that the only outcome was death. 21. Xie Qingzhen, who was fighting outside, opened the city gate and marched back under such circumstances. He was dressed in fine clothes, riding a horse, holding a spear, and his face was still stained with blood from the battlefield. He easily stopped the turbulent people. Following Xie Qingzhen into the city were soldiers who were still in armor and doctors carrying medicine boxes. They all came back voluntarily. Arrange order and medical care in the city. He rushed anxiously among the people, asking everyone he met if they had seen his wife. His wife used to be mute, but now she can speak, but she doesn't like to talk. His wife is the tofu beauty of Nanming Lane. He is looking for his wife. 22. I sat weakly in the isolation area of the clinic, covered in rashes. I heard Xiaohu talking to me outside the door about the gossip about the general looking for his wife in the imperial city. One of them couldn't hold it in and started coughing uncontrollably, and soon the blood soaked his handkerchief. Xiaohu was so scared outside that he called for a doctor. Xiaohu is a neighbor's child. His family was infected with an epidemic, so the people in the alley locked the house in the dark. When I heard the crying and broke into the door despite everyone's advice, the neighbor couple were both dead, leaving only Xiaohu. I developed a rash 2 days after I left my neighbor's house, but luckily Xiaohu was fine. I left all my money and food to Xiaohu, but Xiaohu spent the money at the clinic, sent me here, and stayed with me outside the door every day. I knew he had been hungry for several days, and I didn't have many days left to live. Maybe I can ask him to go find Xie Qingzhen.
23.
Before Xiaohu went to find Xie Qingzhen found me first. He asked the guards to open the door, but the imperial physician and the soldiers refused to let him. General, you are the backbone. What would we do if you were infected? What about the imperial city? Xie Qingzhen pursed his cracked lips and said solemnly, "The men I brought with me are the best of the best. If you can't do anything, what else can I do? You are in the imperial city, and Xie Yi is fighting the enemy outside the city." Xie Qingzhen choked up, but revealed his determination. "But I'm the only one left. I've already sacrificed her for the greater good before. This time, I just want to firmly choose her. Even if I die, it's worth it if I die with her." Xie Qingzhen didn't even tie the protective cloth covering his mouth and nose. He kicked the door open and walked towards me. I weakly opened my eyes and looked at him. I don't know what I was feeling. I wanted to tell him to get lost and to scold him, but I swallowed the words back just before I opened my mouth. Finally ignoring him, I closed my eyes. His tears fell on me, and he held me in his arms. Sway, you still don't want to talk to me? It's okay. I'll talk to you, and you just listen." His voice was hoarse. "Don't be afraid. I will always be with you. I really won't leave you alone this time. Even if I die, I will die before you. The road to the underworld is too dark. I'll go and wait for you. I'll definitely do what I said before." When Xie Qingzhen was still a KO, he did say this to me. But a KO is a KO and Xie Qingzhen is Xie Qingzhen. I can tell them apart. It doesn't matter if Xie Qingzhen can't do what a KO said. After all, my KO will never come back. This is what I told myself ever since Xie Qingzhen wanted me to be his concubine.
24.
The imperial physician tried his best to keep me alive with medicine. Xie Qingzhen ignored the red rashes all over my body. He dressed me up every day, and I didn't even want to look in the mirror, but he often kissed my forehead and praised me. "My Sway is so pretty." He fed me medicine every day and always gave me 2 pieces of honey after the bitter medicine. He feeds me every day, and even if I eat one more bite, he will exclaim exaggeratedly, Sway performed really well today. Eating more is good for your health." Even though I don't like to talk to him, he still enjoys it. His condition was not optimistic. Symptoms began to appear, and I finally asked him to go. He smiled shamelessly. "Wherever Sway is, there is Chow." Just like my silly husband before. I held back my tears and asked him, "Xie Qingzhen, is it worth it? If you leave now, The throne will be at your fingertips. Why bother to stay here with me and waste your life? Xie Qingzhen tapped my forehead lightly. What nonsense are you talking about? Sway, with you here, everything is worth it. 25. I felt more and more chest tightness and difficulty breathing. I thought I couldn't hold on any longer. Xie Qingzhen would hang the dagger on his waist every day. Sway, you can't do it anymore. I will slit my wrists immediately and die before you. I will take you to the underworld, and you won't be afraid anymore. Every day I dragged my weak body and tried my best to throw his dagger away. Before Xie Qingzhen could use the knife, things quickly took a turn for the better. The people brought by Xie Qingzhen are indeed elites, and the turning point actually lies with Xiaohu. He stayed at home with his sick parents for a month without being infected with the disease. Xiaohu continued to cooperate with the imperial physician in blood-drawing research, and the soldiers brought back poison samples and herbs from the western regions. Antidote pills were quickly developed and distributed. Ultimately, this epidemic is actually a toxin. After taking the detoxifying pills and acupuncture to eliminate the toxins, your body will return to normal. Shangjing slowly regained its vitality. Xie Yi led the Xie family army to capture Prince Nanan and the emperor alive, and beheaded them in public as a sacrifice to heaven. The palace was also renovated. The fire in the palace did not kill many people, except Princess Ningping, who was imprisoned in the cold palace. 26. The war in southern Fujian was settled. One had to admit that Xie Qingzhen was indeed a good general who led an invincible army. The Japanese pirates were driven back to the island and dared not go ashore again. I also prepared to go home with Xiaohu. The day I left the capital, I held my household registration card and felt as if I were in another world. I didn't say goodbye to Xie Qingzhen,
But he still knew the day I left.
At the gate of Shangjing City, there was a sound of flying horse hooves. A group of soldiers cleared the way, and Xie Qingzhen rode his horse at full speed. Just like before, he dismounted with red eyes and just looked at me silently. This time it didn't stop me from leaving. I don't have anything to say to him. She turned around and waved to him, then carried her bag and walked home with Xiaohu, facing the rising sun. 27. 10 months later, a man covered in blood appeared in my yard. Xiaohu and I worked together to turn him over and wipe off the blood. The handsome and familiar facial features gradually appeared, and the man slowly woke up. My name is Song Chao. The grace of saving my life should be repaid with my own body. He deliberately showed the bleeding wound on his forehead. My dear, will you allow me to marry you?